It began with horses and ended with machines. When the guns first opened fire in August 1914, no one imagined the world would never be the same again. In 4 short years, humanity transformed the art of war into a science of annihilation. This is the story of the machines that reshaped the battlefield, and the men who were consumed by them. The Great War was not only fought by soldiers. It was fought by engines of death. At the dawn of the 20th century, Europe believed in progress. Electric light, radio, the automobile, the airplane, every invention promised a brighter future. Science was a symbol of civilization. But when war came, that same genius turned dark. The laboratories that once built the tools of life became factories of destruction. The Industrial Revolution had created a new power, the power to kill on an unimaginable scale. The Great War was the first conflict of the machine age, a war where engineers were as essential as generals, and factories became as important as front lines. It was the moment when humanity lost control of its own creations. The old world of cavalry and bayonets was swept aside by steel, gas, and fire. Nothing defined the new era more than the machine gun. When it first appeared, many dismissed it as impractical. But on the battlefields of 1914, it proved devastating. A single Maxim gun, cooled by water and fed by endless belts of ammunition, could fire 600 rounds a minute, enough to cut down an entire wave of attacking soldiers in seconds. Armies that still believed in glory charges and shining sabers were shattered by its power. In the early days, British, French, and German officers all made the same mistake. They ordered their men to attack head-on. At Mons, the British fired their rifles so rapidly that German troops believed they were facing machine guns. But it was at the Marne and later at the Somme that the full horror of automatic fire became clear. Waves of men advanced into walls of bullets, disappearing in clouds of smoke and dust. No courage could overcome such firepower. The machine gun turned battlefields into slaughterhouses. It forced soldiers underground into trenches. It changed the geometry of war, from open fields to a narrow strip of mud and wire, where every movement was death. The Great War had become a war of machines, not of men. Yet the machine gun was only the beginning. The true killer of World War I was the artillery gun. More soldiers were killed by shells than by any other weapon. By 1916, artillery fire was so constant that veterans said they no longer heard explosions, only a single endless roar. Shells ranging from small mortars to giant 420mm Big Berthas shattered fortresses and vaporized men. At Verdun, over 60 million shells were fired in 10 months. The earth itself seemed to bleed. The science behind it was coldly mathematical. Spotters and observers used new techniques of triangulation, while factories produced high-explosive shells by the millions. Entire regions of France and Belgium became moonscapes of craters and twisted metal. For the first time, destruction was industrial, calculated, efficient, impersonal. Soldiers learned to fear the sound of approaching shells. The high-pitched whiz was followed by a thunderclap and a rain of shrapnel. There was no defense except to hide, to dig deeper, or to pray. Many never heard the one that killed them. Artillery created a new psychological wound, shell shock. Men returned from the front trembling, mute, and broken, unable to explain what they had seen. The machines had not only destroyed bodies, they had shattered minds. While the ground was torn apart, a new frontier opened above, the sky. In 1914, aircraft were primitive, made of wood, cloth, and wire, barely capable of staying aloft. At first, they were used for reconnaissance. Observers leaned over the side with binoculars and sketched enemy positions. But soon, pilots began to arm themselves with pistols and rifles. Aerial duels followed, awkward, clumsy, but deadly. By 1915, machine guns were mounted on aircraft. A Dutch engineer, Anthony Fokker, perfected a system that allowed a gun to fire through the propeller without destroying it. This invention transformed the airplane into a weapon. The first dogfights were born. Duels fought thousands of feet above the trenches. The skies filled with aces. Men like the Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen, who shot down 80 opponents before his own death. They became legends, knights of the air in a war that had lost its romance. But behind the heroism lay mass production. By 1918, thousands of aircraft filled the skies, bombers, fighters, and reconnaissance planes, all powered by the same relentless logic: dominance through technology. For the first time, cities far from the front were attacked from above. Zeppelins floated silently over London, dropping bombs on sleeping civilians. The war had reached the home front. Nowhere was safe. As the stalemate dragged on, armies searched for a way to break through the trench lines. Barbed wire, machine guns, and artillery had made frontal assaults impossible. The answer came from Britain, a strange, armored vehicle that crawled on tracks like a mechanical beast. They called it a tank, a code name to disguise its true purpose. When they first appeared on the battlefield of the Somme in 1916, soldiers on both sides watched in disbelief. The machines moved slowly, groaning and clattering, crushing obstacles in their path. Bullets bounced harmlessly off their armor. Behind them, infantry advanced in their wake. The early tanks were crude and unreliable. Engines overheated, tracks snapped, and many broke down before reaching enemy lines. Inside, the air was choking, filled with smoke, oil, and heat. Crews suffered burns, carbon monoxide poisoning, and claustrophobia. But even with all their flaws, tanks changed the psychology of war. For the first time, the machine had become an armored monster, a symbol of unstoppable force. By 1918, hundreds of tanks rolled across Europe, paving the way for the mechanized warfare of the future. The world had witnessed the dawn of a new era, the Age of Steel. But the most terrifying invention of all was invisible. On April 22, 1915, near Ypres, the wind carried a strange yellow-green cloud across the battlefield. At first, soldiers thought it was a smoke screen. Then came the burning in their throats, the agony in their lungs. Chlorine gas. Within minutes, men were choking, clawing at their necks, collapsing into the mud. Gas warfare had begun. Soon, chemists on both sides raced to create new formulas: phosgene, diphosgene, and finally mustard gas. It blistered skin, blinded eyes, and lingered in shell holes for days. Gas masks became as essential as rifles. Even animals were fitted with protective gear. The battlefield was now a laboratory of death, where science itself had become a weapon. The gas did not decide battles, but it changed the rules forever. It introduced terror that no machine gun or shell could match: the fear of the unseen. By the end of the war, over 1 million soldiers had been gassed. Many survived, but carried the scars, the blindness, the coughing, the nightmares, for the rest of their lives. Even the oceans became part of this technological apocalypse. The Great War was the first true submarine war. Germany's U-boats turned the seas into hunting grounds. They stalked merchant ships silently, unseen beneath the waves, striking without warning. Torpedoes ripped through hulls, sending crews and cargo to the bottom. In 1915, the sinking of the Lusitania shocked the world. Over 1,000 civilians killed in minutes. Proved that no one was safe, not even those far from the front. The submarine had rewritten the laws of war. It was no longer soldier against soldier. It was nation against nation, technology against humanity. Above the waves, new weapons joined the fight. Dreadnought battleships armed with massive guns that could fire shells miles away. Naval warfare became a contest of engineering, not seamanship. The old romance of the sea had died, drowned in smoke and steel. Behind every gun and engine, another revolution was taking place. Communication. Telegraphs, field telephones, and wireless radios allowed armies to coordinate on a scale never seen before. But these same systems also created new forms of vulnerability, intercepted messages, miscommunication, and chaos. In the early days, runners carried messages through artillery fire. Many never returned. By 1916, telephone cables connected trenches, but shellfire constantly cut them. Signal flares, carrier pigeons, and flags became vital tools of survival. The battlefield had become a network, a primitive version of modern command and control. Each innovation made the war more efficient, and therefore more deadly. Behind the trenches, the real engine of war was industry. The Great War consumed materials on an unimaginable scale. Every bullet, every shell, every uniform came from a factory. Entire economies were mobilized. Men went to the front, women went to work. In Britain, France, and Germany, millions labored in munitions plants. They mixed explosives, forged steel, and assembled death by hand. They were the invisible soldiers of the home front, the heartbeat of the machine. But industry had a price. Explosions in factories killed thousands. Poison fumes from chemical plants caused slow, painful deaths. The war was not only fought in trenches. It was fought in furnaces and workshops, in the very heart of civilization. When the guns finally fell silent in November 1918, the world was unrecognizable. 10 million soldiers were dead. Entire landscapes were erased. Cities once filled with music and laughter now lay in ruins. But the machines remained. They had proven their power, and humanity had learned to depend on them. The tank, the airplane, the submarine, the gas, all would return, perfected, in wars to come. World War I was the beginning, not the end. Historians would later call it the war to end all wars. But it was also the war that taught mankind how to wage total war, how to turn science into destruction, and industry into death. The optimism of the 19th century died in the trenches. The belief that technology could only serve progress was gone. In its place grew a new understanding that every invention carries within it the potential for horror. And yet, amid the wreckage, there were still glimpses of hope. The engineers who dreamed of peace, the scientists who turned their minds back to healing, the pilots who saw the beauty of flight beyond its violence. The same human genius that built the engines of death could, perhaps, one day build the engines of life.